Welcome to the Healing Her Story podcast, a podcast where we reclaim our stories, reconnect with our bodies, and remember the wisdom we were never taught and yet always carried. I'm your host, Riva Jean-Paul, a trauma-informed somatic practitioner, menstrual cycle coach, interdisciplinary artist, and guide for women walking the path of healing, awakening, and becoming. This show is for the woman who's tired of holding it all together, for the one who's done the talk therapy, read the books, and tried to meditate her way through the pain, and is now ready to go deeper. We live in a world that asks so much of women, a world that rewards our silence, praises our productivity, and shames our sensitivity. The systems we've been raised in were not built for our bodies, our rhythms, or our truth. But here, we do things differently. Together, we explore the cycles of the natural world and the menstrual cycle, the medicine of somatics, the power of creative expression, and the radical act of slowing down. Each episode is a journey through personal reflections, seasonal rhythms, expert conversations, and the deeper layers of what it means to heal from the inside out. Because healing isn't about fixing what's broken, because I do not believe you are broken. It's about remembering who you are and reconnecting with the wisdom and the healing intelligence that lives inside of you. I am so glad you are here. Let's begin. Fighting for the voice of the womb, diving to the depths of my womb, singing the truth of my womb, trusting the phases of the moon. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode on the Healing Her Story podcast. I am just beaming with excitement and joy for today's conversation. I have an incredible guest. This is probably, one of the biggest moments for the show. I feel like it's truly such an honor to have this woman on. Before I introduce her, I just want to share a little bit about how I connected with this woman without going too deep into the story. As a lot of people who have entered in my life, this woman came into my life in a very divinely guided way. I had been hosting retreats locally here where I live in Northern California and was seeing some things that made me feel like I was missing something. And so I began searching, didn't know for what. I had heard the word trauma-informed care from a friend of mine who is also on a similar path as me. And it was just kind of like a small seed. And so when I'm looking for other support and resources, I stumbled upon an episode that had the words trauma-informed care and plant medicine, which were two things that were very much alive for me. And so I listened to the podcast episode, and it helped me to understand some of the things that I was missing. And there was an invitation at the end of the episode to join a training. And I don't know if you've ever heard this story. And so I went to the website and I looked at the training, and there was an application for a scholarship program, and it closed that night. And so I thought, wow, this feels like incredible timing. So I filled out the application, and I even told myself, even if I don't get the scholarship, I'm still going to do this training. And I think maybe I got a partial or a discount code or something. And again, it wasn't a deal breaker for me. I knew I needed to do this training. And little did I know, I went looking for my clients, for the women I was serving, and I got so much more. And I was invited to a level of depth in my healing that I had not yet experienced. And it completely changed my life. That was just the first training, and then the second and the third and the fourth. And it's just continued to, just completely bring me home to myself, show up for people in a way that is not always seen in the world. And it's been truly such a joy and a beauty and a blessing to be in connection with this woman. So let me introduce her. Her name is Atira Tan, and she is a somatic trauma specialist, educator, and spiritual practitioner with decades of experience guiding people back to safety, sovereignty, and inner wisdom. She weaves together trauma-informed care, yoga, somatics, meditation, and embodied healing to support individuals and communities worldwide. Atira is the founder of Art to Healing, a nonprofit dedicated to ending sexual violence, and has trained thousands of practitioners in trauma-informed approaches. Her life's work centers on restoring connection to self, to others, and to earth through compassion, embodiment, and service. Atira, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, River. It's so lovely to be here. And thank you so much for sharing, how our connection has landed for you, impacted you, moved me really deeply. I thank you so much for that. Yeah, I'm really touched.
Yeah, I'm happy to share it. Once I started doing that and I saw how well received that was for all the guests, I just continued to do it. It's nice to be able to have that moment.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, of course. Well, Atira, I always ask our guests the very first question, can you tell us about your story?
Yes, sure. So I might I might start at the
Good question.
beginning because Um, I think that the environment that I grew up with really, shaped the way that I live and what I offer in the world. So I might actually start there first. So I think that it's important to kind of share firstly that, I was born in Singapore. Um, and my background is from Southeast Asia. And I grew up in a very kind of dangerous environment where, there was a lot of persecution, there was a lot of chaos, there was a lot of danger in my immediate kind of family environment, which kind of led to the presentation that I think that we're familiar with, which is complex post-traumatic, stress disorder. And in as I was kind of growing up, I think from the get-go, even as an infant, or I would say even in maybe as I was, in my mother's womb, in that kind of very vulnerable perinatal state, things were really chaotic and not very kind of secure, my needs weren't being met. So at a very young age, there was both that imprint of abuse and neglect. And I think that there are many kind of different layers to the story. I was also brought up in I grew up in a Christian cult where my father was the leader of a Christian cult. And that really kind of amplified, I think, a lot of the existing kind of imprints with, growing up Asian, having certain, I think, layers of intergenerational and ancestral kind of trauma from, being immigrants that come from a long line of immigrants, people kind of moving to Singapore, moving to an extremely kind of colonized country, where the only reason why the country was there was because of the British India Company for trade, which has, its different kind of levels of complexity when we start to look at trauma, I think, from, the different layers, from the environment, from society, from the culture,
Yeah.
and then our own personal history. And so I grew up in a very dangerous environment. What happened, I think, for me and the way that I survived in that time was through, I think, mostly a lot of disassociation, having to split a lot of different parts of myself off in order just to survive within not just my home, the school, but also the cult as well,
Yeah.
and then the society. And as you probably know, I grew up as a spirit, wild and free,
Mhm.
and very much, a free thinker, very creative, not really kind of from a young age listening to my own inner authority
Mhm.
and being clear what felt right for me, what didn't feel right for me. I think that this comes from a very being born in a very extreme religious kind of context. You're like, just doesn't make sense, all these rules and expectations, just it's not resonant for just me. It's not my truth, but it's
Yeah.
my parents' truth, and and
Oh.
there are shadow sides of trauma, and they spin us into a place of deep suffering and pain. And then there's also a healing vortex that's attached to it. So everything is, that they're both that we're holding. And I think that even though it was a very painful environment to grow up in, what it really cultivated and nurtured was this deep sense to that inner authority, like what feels right for me, what feels good, what feels true,
Mhm.
and what feels untrue, you know. Um, so within, I think that context, I had to really split off parts of myself to feel safe in my home, in the uh, kind of religious group that was a very big part of my parents' lives, and also the society in Singapore, the culture
Yeah.
in Asia, which also has its heirlooms, but it also has its imprints. There are so many wonderful things about, being born in Singapore and being Southeast Asian. And there are also things that are persecutory, like the rejection and the persecution,
Yeah.
people that think outside of the box. And
Yeah.
literally in Singapore is political because there is no free speech in Singapore, for
Wow.
instance. So if you speak something against the government or speak something against, someone of authority, you get thrown in jail or house arrest immediately.
Wow.
So there is this kind of layer to my environment.
Yeah.
And therefore, I needed to really kind of split off and disassociate to the point where I grew up mostly quite numb, I would say, because it wasn't safe to really feel, it wasn't really safe to, yeah, just be myself,
Yeah.
My blueprint, what we call in the way that I teach, the blueprint wasn't safe. It was
Mm.
extremely collapsed.
Yeah.
And as I was kind of growing up as a young person, I think that this is where my experience and my knowledge and wisdom with plant medicine and psychedelics come in because um, when I was a young person, I was very fortunate to meet a very wise human being that supported me in using psychedelics to heal. And I was young. I would say to the audience that I probably was initiated, I suppose, into this psychedelic experience a little bit younger than most people, but I still kind of had I think, wisdom and maturity, I think, to really understand what was going on.
Mm.
But in this experience that I had as a very young person, and this person was a wonderful guy. First of all, I must say that I'm very fortunate that as a young person, as a very vulnerable, at risk, young person, I was very fortunate that this person was extremely safe, that he knew exactly how to guide me, how to give me space, and yet, prompt a deeper curiosity and exploration within myself in that journey. And I now understand how special that was, because I have experienced a lot of guides since then that haven't had that attunement and nuance to their holding. So I was very grateful that I had him. And in that experience, psychedelic experience, what happened was that I had a moment where I could really feel it was almost like many shields of protection and pain around my being. And in one moment, it was like God just entered me.
Wow.
And all of that protection, all that pain for the first time in my life, just broke. It was like the shields just cracked and they broke. And for the first time in my life, I really had a direct experience of the divine,
Mm.
of my blueprint. Actually, it was like the only thing I could say was like, oh, Atira is here at last. Like I can feel myself. I can feel God, I
Mm.
mean God, not like a man in the, in the
No.
sky, but the intelligence of
Yes.
the universe. I
Yes.
can feel the divine, the intelligence of the universe, the greater picture of why we're alive, um, in that direct experience kind of moment. And that was a very big, I think, turning point. That really was the beginning of a never kind of ending journey of healing and discovery and, personal development and really spiritual awakening, that I'm still on, and
Yeah.
I really enjoy, and that's really has been the center and the axis mundi of my life.
Yeah.
And so from that experience, I was very fortunate because I was also invited into very small kind of psychedelic circles where um, we would really support each other to be creative. It was really a creative circle because I was a painter, and I was started as an artist, and we would paint and draw and write plays and write poetry and make music together in that space. But we would also support each other to go extremely deep into exploring the emotional, and spiritual and psychological, nature of life.
Hmm.
And I think as a young person, that was really when I started my journey of the deeper healing. And before, because of my, background, I've been through the mental health system. I was extremely kind of suicidal as a young person. Um, but none of those services really helped me. But that was when I started to understand, okay, what is self-reflection? What is meditation? What is mm, really being able to go inside and start building a relationship with that blueprint. Really started with the blueprint, which is why it's such a huge theme, I think, in a lot of my courses as a resource, because that is really, what I believe will heal you.
Hmm.
And guides, facilitators, therapists can hold that with you, that they can mirror that and reflect that. But I think really in the healing journey of trauma, the blueprint is essential. It's really what heals us back to, as we're being who we are, yeah, embodying who we are, remembering who we are, truly are. So that's a little bit of that part of my story. And what happened afterwards was that I immigrated to Australia, to Melbourne. And I, studied to be an artist. I did my bachelor's in fine arts. And I think that I always wanted, for me in my healing journey, also with psychedelics, for me, creativity was the main channel of healing for me. So, what I would paint, what I would see in, my visions, either in altered or non-altered states of consciousness, that art was just a way of, me giving me a channel to really explore what was in my inner world. And I really believed in it as healing, So after I finished my degree, I went on and studied counseling, psychology, and then trained to be an art therapist, which I absolutely loved. And from that experience of, you know, being an intern, working in acute mental health, working in domestic violence, I worked with, folks that were struggling with intellectual disabilities. Um, at a certain point, I was like, studying is enough. Like I've studied for so long, I feel like I need to just travel.
Yeah.
And the first place I think I got to on my travels, I was 24 at that time. And it was 7 years after the war had ended in Cambodia. I don't know if many of the listeners have been to a war-torn country.
Yeah.
But for a kind of a privilege, I would say, even though I've been through a lot of trauma, mm, I I I perceive myself as an extremely privileged person because coming from Asia, there are so little opportunities here, especially for women in the generation that I kind of grew up. So to even have, a education system, you know,
Yeah.
because one of the wonderful things in Singapore is that like everybody has an education that's free of charge.
That's great. Yeah.
I found myself to be really very lucky to have that, to never have struggled really with like physical survival needs.
Hmm.
Even though my parents were very abusive, like emotionally, very neglectful, emotionally and physically, spiritually, like there was a lot of different layers of abuse, but they always put food on the table. I had the clothes to wear. They really focused on my education. And when I first landed in Cambodia and started to explore Asia, a lot of women don't even have that. A lot of women, a lot of, men, children go to bed very hungry. Clean water is not available. And I think that we take that a lot for granted. And this is actually the global majority. So when I arrived in Cambodia 7 years after the war had ended, it was really intense. Like I was like, wow, I am so incredibly privileged,
Mm.
even though I've been through a lot of suffering, in like inner suffering. And I actually saw, because the country's just so poor at that time, one of the ways that, these impoverished families would make money is to traffic their daughters,
Mm.
into sexual servitude. Because one of the reasons, there are many different reasons that I mean, I could go into, but one of the main reasons was poverty.
Mm.
And so on the street that I lived, every evening, parents, the families would line the daughters up. They were 8, 9 years old. They were young.
Wow.
And I would walk past that, every single evening to
Wow.
my apartment. And I was just so shocked, it's just, just so shocked. And even like if you go, I mean, here where I live in Thailand, I mean, there's just, sexual servitude is an issue. Trafficking, child trafficking is an issue. And it's multiplying, it's amplifying the world,
Wow.
in addition to all the other things that are amplifying the world.
Yeah.
Um, and there was something inside of me that was like, I have to do something about this. I am really privileged. I have all the resources. I'm a therapist, I can stay here. I had enough I'm going to stay here. I'm going to get a job. I'm curious. I'm curious, and I want to do something around this. And I think that one thing that I do have to name, which kind of is a big element around my decision, is that when I started my journey with psychedelics, what ultimately led me very quickly was to yoga. And when I talk about yoga, I don't just mean asana. I really talk about the depth of yoga, like yoga philosophy,
Mhm.
the way that we live our lives. And one of the channels of yoga as a way of living is really karma yoga, which is the yoga of action, and also bhakti yoga, which is the yoga of devotion. Then you have jnana yoga and many, um, different ways of how we can embody that connection to the divine in our lives, right? And that's really, I think, that's my spiritual path. It's not just mental, it's not just like, it's really like, how do you put that devotion, that connection to God, that love, what you're being taught by meditation, yogic philosophy, psychedelics, what you understand about the dimensions of human existence, how do you channel that into your actions?
Mm.
And for me, very clearly, I think from the get-go, karma yoga was my way. And this is the way of service. And this was the way that I was like, I'm going to step out in service. So long story short, I started working in Cambodia with these women and girls. And then I started my own charity that brought me all over the world, and working with very marginalized populations. I worked in many different kind of areas of international development with the global majority. But I would say that my passion and my biggest kind of my biggest love, my biggest passion is really my purpose is to I see that as to inspire and to guide women in Asia into a place of sovereignty within themselves, because
Mhm.
that was a path that I had to also take.
Yeah.
And there might not be time to share that part of the story in the interview. But how it kind of, I think, leads to, the work that I offer now and my offerings. I worked in disaster relief. I worked with victims of war and torture. I also worked in refugees and asylum seekers, worked in the camps, slept in the camps, refugee camps. So really, I'm sharing that part of my work experience because I think that when you work with trauma, it's very important to see lots of different bodies and lots of nervous systems and lots of stories, because everybody's different and every culture is different. So when I'm working with Australia with a mostly, say white body population,
Mhm.
the way that I'm holding space is completely different
Yeah.
to when I'm going into the refugee camps and working with like a Korean population, let's say,
Right.
or when I'm going to Nepal, when I'm going to India or Cambodia or Thailand. It's like different. People
Mm.
have different the physiology of the person and the nervous system. We all share that, including all mammals share that. But there are many different layers and nuances in the way how we hold space for the resolution of trauma. And I just wanted to name and thank all my clients, all the people that I've seen, all the different communities, because we work very much on the grassroots community level.
Mhm.
Um, and really, I wouldn't be like the educator and the therapist I am today without um, being so intimate with them, I think. And
Yeah.
I really, yeah, having firsthand experience of understanding all these stories and all these complexities of trauma, and not just that, but like their resources and like their strengths, and just how adversity has shaped them, and how, again, like connecting to the blueprint.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I will name is that when I started my journey as an art therapist, expressive art therapist, when I was put in such complex trauma situations with my clients where there are levels of displacement, there are levels of CPTSD, there are levels of, sexual abuse. But, I mean, displacement is a really big thing when you just, when there's war, when
Yeah.
you've lost your loved ones, where there's
Yeah.
so many different layers of that. I would say 100% that creativity was just not enough, like
Mm.
my training as an art therapist, and even though I done a lot of other kind of trauma training before, like EMDR and so on and so forth, it's something was just missing from working with my clients, you know. And so then I started, somatic experiencing that program about 15 years ago. And that really was the missing key when I started to learn about the body, when I started to learn about, the nervous system, the physiology, I was just like, oh my goodness, well, that's the missing piece,
Mhm.
not just with my clients, but also like within my own personal healing.
Mhm.
Because even though I had that amazing experience with psychedelics and I continue to have beautiful healing experiences with psychedelics, I found that it wasn't enough, especially for my imprints of trauma. Like it wasn't enough. It only opened like a portal. It was an opening of a portal. It gave me an experience of my blueprint.
Mhm.
But as you probably know, with psychedelics, it's just an experience. Like you actually have to work at making it real. Like when I talk about real, I mean like you're feeling it every moment, like you know that you can lean on this blueprint. You trust it.
Mhm.
It comes up in your thoughts, your speech, your actions, the way that you feel about yourself. Like that is like embodied.
Yes.
That is a long journey.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have glimpses of that. Sometimes I have very long moments and long periods where I feel, that's anchored. And then there are certain moments when adversity happens in my life where I'm like, oh, the blueprint kind of fades into the
Yeah.
background. And I think that it's a constant work, it's a constant effort.
Mhm.
And for me, in my own healing journey, I needed so much more support, than just psychedelics. I really needed the right layers of support,
Mhm.
therapy, and a lot of the therapy that worked for me as a CPTSD survivor was the somatic work.
Mhm.
It wasn't really, there's so many different layers and so many different modalities that I can name. I went to see a Hakomi practitioner. SE was very much somatic experiencing was very much, a pillar in my life, but also NAM, neuroaffective touch, womb surround work with Ray Castellino. There's so many things, but they all come under like the bracket and the umbrella of the connection with the body, the connection not just to the body, but to the inner healing intelligence in the
Yes.
body,
Yes.
right? Um, yeah, so that's a little bit of my story and how I ended up being, um, yeah, that part of me that's an activist, part of me that's an educator, part of
Mhm.
me that is a really I love working with clients. I love working with people's bodies.
Mhm.
And also I feel very passionate, especially in the psychedelic world, because I have been part of the psychedelic community for, almost 30 years.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like part of the karma yoga, part of the role and responsibility that I have, maybe, as a person that has been in this community for a really long time, is really one of protection,
Mhm.
and one of safety, one of protection. And because plant medicines and psychedelics, they have the power to heal, but they also have the power of making us very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And, in that experience that I had with, all of my protection and all of those layers, those armors like breaking open, if I had a malintentioned, I was so vulnerable. I mean, I was so vulnerable and I was so at risk.
Yeah.
And if that space really needs a very, very mature, humble, a person that is able to put away their ego to be completely present to what's kind of going on. They need education. It's a nuanced, vulnerable, and sensitive space. And I've gone through experiences when that hasn't happened and I've been abused,
Mm.
sexually in these, experiences. And it just created so much damage to me. Lost so much trust in myself and, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I really feel very strongly about that karma yoga. We really need to step up and help each other.
Hmm.
And we have to do that through action. We have to do
Yes.
that. It's very practical. It's like, yes, we have that impulse, but we have to do it through action. And if there is no action, then your words are just empty, like what is just empty. All these things that we think and ideas and concepts, they're all empty unless we embody it and then we go the next step to actually put it into action. And I think that for me, that's what is missing sometimes quite a lot in the spiritual community and
Yes.
the plant medicine and psychedelic community. And I totally understand why. But I think, want to create a new way of being here in the world, which is, one that can integrate all of these parts of being human together.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
it does. Yeah, to me. It makes perfect sense to me. Wow. Oh, thank you so much for your generous share of your heart, of your history, of your story. You really do have a very rich, rich, rich story. And I can really hear how your own experience has really shaped the way that you've, yeah, now hold space for others. And it's so beautiful to witness. And I can really hear your blueprint throughout all of it as well. And also really celebrating your resilience as well. You've shared so much there, and I love what you've shared about the different types of trauma. And I appreciate you naming that because I don't know that people understand that sometimes, that trauma is not just, a car accident or, of course, it can be war, it can be abuse, and it can also be emotional neglect. And I find anytime I share that with someone, there's always this kind of like, oh, because, and that was my experience too. I never understood that. So you've really highlighted the different layers of trauma as well, religious trauma, societal trauma, and these are things that I have learned from you as well. And I'm so curious, like hearing about your story and how you began listening to your own inner sense at such a young age. Like that's incredible. And as you continue to follow that and follow your curiosity and create these new frameworks and ways of being and ways of working with people, I'm I'm thinking of your trauma informed principles and I'm wondering how much of those were shaped by your own history. Like were these things that you kind of gathered from, like, say, your education, or were these things that you kind of created from your own experience, or maybe a little bit of both?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
Yeah, both. I really want to share that these principles really were created by people that did a lot of research
Hmm.
into trauma
Yeah.
and created principles that they found very helpful,
Hmm.
especially for guides and facilitators, teachers, to hold kind of spaces where people could connect inside that could amplify that felt sense of safety.
Hmm.
And, when I was learning these principles as a CPTSD survivor,
Right.
I would try that out,
Hmm.
within myself. And I would really, I think it would be highlighted when I would be in a space with a facilitator or a teacher that did not embody those principles,
Right.
right? That did not were not, number one, I think that there's awareness. When you don't even have awareness of these
Hmm.
principles, that I think that you come in and you guide people in a way that, I don't know, it's like a blind spot or something, like
It
something's kind of
is.
missing.
Yeah.
But then there's also many kind of different layers to the trauma-informed work. I think, first of all, it's not just a kind of checklist, I think, that people kind of check off and say, oh, I provided choice and agency, like I'm using empathic language and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I believe that trauma is universal. But it's really kind of like, first is the embodiment piece of like facilitators getting it not just in their heads, because we're multidimensional people, aren't we? Like there's the mind, which is I think usually for folks, the first level that that it
Hmm.
enters.
Yeah.
Then it's the heart, where we really start to have empathy and like emotional attunement and resonance with ourselves and also the people that we're with. And that's really, I think, beyond the mind. But first, the mind has to get it. And then, but really, the next step is like the heart really needs to get it.
Yeah.
And then there is the body piece, which is the embodiment of these principles. But the way that I also see the body is that the body and the nervous system is a tuning fork. It's like our nervous systems is an antenna that resonates with people in that room.
Hmm.
And what we're really doing in the trauma informed approach, when we bring the body and the heart and the mind into it, is that we are really attuning, we're kind of listening with this full whole body listening to the nervous systems, to what's kind of happening, what we say in the field, right?
Hmm.
Because there's information in the field, there's information in each cell of space that we are really listening to.
Yeah.
And when we're listening as well with the organ of the heart, you know, it's not an energetic woo-woo thing. It's like the heart actually have nerve cells that on a electromagnetic level,
Yes.
they extend out of us and they actually connect with different hearts in the room.
Yeah.
So when we kind of, I think when we attune to that layer of suffering, and well, I really want to also share that like being trauma informed is not just around suffering and adversity. It's also around like being able to see people's strengths.
Yeah.
It's able to see people's light. Like I remember when I was like walking past these girls that were being trafficked on the street, and like when I continued working with them, I could see their spark. It wasn't that they were like just survivors that
Right.
had been through this terrible experience. Like they had so many incredible qualities in them. They were, some of them were really alive, like, some of them were so smart, like they had this fire about survival. Like there was so many amazing things about them. And I think that part of being trauma informed, really, when you get into what it truly means on a level of walking this path, is that, it's like we are listening, we're attuning,
Hmm.
we're really receiving a person, we're receiving the information from them of their suffering and also of their blueprint as well. And we are kind of balancing the both, like really
Hmm.
being sensitive, really being attuned on that level of the mind, the emotions, but also in your nervous system, and using the power of like co-regulation um, to create spaces of repair,
Yeah.
right? Spaces of repair, like spaces where people can feel, you know, that they're met with the right kind of support,
Hmm.
because this trauma-informed approach is also a very individualized approach.
Hmm.
And these 10 principles are like the, they're really like the walls of that space, of
Hmm.
repair.
Yeah.
So we're creating, what I visualize usually is like we're creating a temple,
Hmm.
step in my trauma-informed temple. And these pillars, these principles, these walls are that container, we kind of use them, if we're inspired by them, if we also integrate them in our lives in the way how we firstly communicate to ourselves, hold space for
Yes.
ourselves, and also those in, community, then we create a very kind of a container that within that field, that space in the container, magic can really happen.
Yes.
And when you are talking about working with plant medicine and psychedelics, that magic amplifies because,
Yeah.
when we are working with plant medicine and psychedelics, that's an amplifier. And if we know what to do, I think as facilitators, we can really amplify that healing vortex.
Hmm.
If we take it seriously, we really
Right.
take the role of being in that place of authority seriously, if we
Hmm.
take it like this is a craft that I'm going to refine, and
Mm.
I have people's hearts and stories and lives and bodies in my hands, I'm going to take it seriously,
Yeah.
um, we can do so much good, I think, with the people that we see and we hold.
Yeah, I've experienced it. I have stepped into your trauma-informed temple and experienced the holding and the just a place where I could really soften and be myself. And yeah, it's hard to articulate and put into
I get
words
it. Yeah,
because
get it.
yeah, it's there's a depth to it. And I remember the first time I stepped into one of your trauma-informed temples, and it was so different than anything I had experienced. And that contrast was a bit, I don't know if unsettling is the right word, but it was just like, oh, like what is happening here? It took me some time to get used to it. It did make me a little uncomfortable at first. Is that something that is common, would you say?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think, yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. You shared that story reminds me a little bit of, I think it was Plato with there is this like metaphor of a person like being in the cave,
Uh-huh. I
and
don't know
then
it. Mm-mm.
yeah, it's just like they're kind of in a cave and but they feel like the cave is like their whole entire world,
Yeah.
and they feel that sense of intrepidation like walking when then someone comes and says, actually, there's a whole, new world outside of this cave. Um, would you like to see it? And of course, like at first there is like intrepidation, right?
Yeah.
Because
Hmm.
cave is what we know in our
Right.
society, our culture.
Hmm.
And it does actually take a while, I think, for folks to kind of settle into that space because it's something that is new and something which is not normal, not something that's not the norm, which I feel both sad, I think,
Right.
about because
Why
yeah,
isn't it the norm?
yeah, I feel sad about that because,
Yeah.
I think that in the past in my activist career, I think that I had so much like hope.
Hmm.
As a young person, working in this field that you think that things are going to get better,
Yeah.
and you're contributing to this thing and things are going to get better. But I mean, if I was really honest, I think that there's certain parts of, our experience in this life that are better. And then there are also other parts that are getting a little bit worse or
Yeah.
a lot worse.
Yeah.
And that really is very heartbreaking for me. And sometimes it's hard
Yeah.
moment. Um, yeah, and I think I kind of go through different waves. Sometimes I do fall into feeling so overwhelmed by sadness and just grief of what's happening in the world and how we're treating each other
Yeah.
um, as a global collective. And it's almost like I need to kind of hit rock bottom in order to start like pivoting to the new now, which is happening kind of all the it happens very quickly, very
Yeah.
more swiftly than normal, what I've experienced in the past. And then again, like, having that fight energy of like, okay, well, this is the truth of how I perceive it. This is the new now. This is the reality.
Hmm.
And how can I respond to that reality without losing the vision that we can create those safe spaces that I know is possible? Because
Yeah.
as you've mentioned, I know they happen in the spaces in the trainings.
Hmm.
I know that folks like yourself, that have come to the trainings are rippling it out in probably even like a greater way that I
Yeah.
can, because everybody finds their style, and
Yeah.
they move from their blueprint because they
Mhm.
trust that connection. And I'm just like so proud of our student, this trauma informed community that you're part of. And I know, I'm just like, oh wow, um it's like we're just doing this together, and all these people are doing it in such a beautiful,
Yeah.
incredible way, spreading this into the world. So, it gives me that drive. It gives
Yeah.
me that fire, that fight to create more of those spaces, to, inspire, to give people tools and education, not just from the level of the mind, but I think a direct experience is really important
Yes.
for
Yeah.
students, because then they're like, oh, wow, this is really the felt sense of
You can
safety.
feel it. Yeah. You can feel
And
it.
this is what it's like.
Hmm.
And this is what I know is possible. And so therefore I know how to lead from that place,
Hmm.
hold space from that place. I can recognize that experience in my participants because I'm so familiar with that within my own body, within my own experience. So yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel like, and I feel like I already know the answer to this, but for our listeners, um, do you feel like to hold a trauma-informed space for another person, that you also have to be able to hold that trauma-informed space inside of yourself first before you can go and then offer it to someone?
Well, I think that the answer is it depends.
Sure.
You know,
That's always your answer. I love
not
it.
always, but in this case, in this particular answer, I think that it depends, because I think that being human and when we work with trauma, it is not like black and white,
Of course. Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
So when I hear this, like being able to hold it in yourself, yes, I think that some level of that is to be, if you want to be a facilitator that walks in integrity,
Hmm.
you need to have a foundation of that,
Yeah.
like to be able to kind of in a way walk the path, have the commitment, like this is something that I commit to, that I'm on the journey of being compassionate towards myself,
Yeah.
all of the different things, attuning to myself, tending to my imprints. Um, but I don't think that, like if we were all like super trauma informed, then it means like we're like awakened and enlightened. And it's
Of
just
course.
not, it's just like being human is not like black and white like that. I
Right.
think one thing that I really want to name is the layers of support that I talk about in my trainings.
Hmm.
That is really important to in when we're walking the path, to have like the right layers of support
Hmm.
to help us, in our journeys. Because as I mentioned, trauma has many different imprints. It's societal, it's cultural, it's intergenerational. It has, for me personally, not being an Asian person, it's got a lot to do with race. I was born in a working class family, a lot to do with class. Like there's so many different
There's
kind of
lots of
layers.
layers. Yeah.
And the imprints are going to come up all the time. We're going to go through these waves of like, okay, I'm very connected to my blueprint at the moment, Yeah, and I'm like very trauma informed right now, and I'm really tending to my parts, and I'm really embodying. And then the adversity comes, and then it throws
Sure.
us off our path.
Yeah.
And, these parts that we need to tend to and that we work with and that that we need, they arise. And then the blueprint kind of, it's not like the blueprint goes away because it never does, but like these parts come into the forefront because they need our love, they need our attention, they need our healing. And I think that the layers of support are very important when that comes in. But when you're in that space where, those parts are there, it doesn't mean that you can't, work with other
Of
people,
course. Yeah.
right? It
Hmm.
means that you're tending to yourself, you have boundaries around,
Hmm.
whatever journey that you're going. And we're being present to the person that we're offering service and care to,
Hmm.
without leaving, ourselves and what we need to tend to behind, which is why I feel like layers of support in this journey of being of service is imperative. It's really essential. Couldn't do my work without the layers of support that I have in my life.
Hmm.
And to also know that the journey has no end.
Yeah.
It's just part of self-actualization, the self-actualization process that Jung talks about. It's just part of that. And we go through cycles of that, like the cycles of the seasons. Like sometimes we're in summer,
Yep.
and it's like, whoa, I think that I'm healed. And this grip of our imprints are not as strong as they were before. And then sometimes something happens and we enter the autumn, then we go into the winter, and we go, oh, I've worked with that part, but maybe that part I have completely split off and disassociated from, and now I have to tend to that part. And then you go down, into that descent. And then again, there's a new beginning because that part, has gotten what it needs to in order to heal. And then we move into the next cycle. So it's always going to be like that.
Yeah.
So, which is why my answer is it depends,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And even as you're naming that dance, I'm like, yep. I'm aware of that dance. We talk about the seasons a lot here and working with the cycles, and I find the healing process to be very cyclical. Yeah. Thanks for sharing all of that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious. I love when these conversations work out this way. You've already answered so many questions. I haven't even had to ask you. You've just shared them. But what I am curious about, I know in a lot of your work you teach about the importance of slowing down and titration. And I'm wondering if you could, for our audience, talk about why that is so important for the healing process and for the therapeutic process.
Yeah, sure. I would love that. I would really love to spend more time talking about this. Okay. So I think the way that I look at trauma is that, as I mentioned, many different levels of trauma, very many different layers of trauma. And, I think that there's a lot of research to show that trauma is really something which is physiological, is in our bodies. Um, like for example, when you get anxious, you say, "Oh, there are butterflies in my stomach," like when our feel our emotions, this is it, like trauma is not happening over there or necessarily in here in your brain and your mind. Is actually happening in the totality of who you are.
Mm,
And this body is your vehicle of consciousness, is your vehicle of awareness. Everything happens in this home of the body. And in the culture that we have with screens and, and so on and so forth, or just the way that we view the body, we see it as like very mechanical, like the body is just an instrument that,
yeah.
we put a lot of, I think, focus in our heads and our minds and our brain, that we're very smart in, in an intellectual way, so on and so forth. And I think that the mind is a very good servant, but it's not really a very good master. And I think
Mm,
that's not my quote. I don't actually remember who said
That's
it, but
good. I'm gonna look
we
it up.
took it with us. I'm taking it. Yeah, I'm sharing it. Um, and the way that I think that we live our lives is very kind of mind focused. It's very brainy. It's very
Yes.
heady, and it goes very fast. And our culture is very fast. There is this like importance of going forward and going as quick, as fast as possible. You know, we live in a very competitive culture. But when we lead from that place, which is very fast, which is very quick, we abandon and we neglect the slower parts of ourselves, which is the heart,
Mm-hmm.
especially. The emotions vibrate on a time signature that is much slower than the mind and thoughts. Then there is also the level of the body as well, which is a lot kind of slower. So if you really pay attention to your nervous system, um, if you pay attention to the sensations of your body, it's kind of it's a slower time signature, it's a slower vibration. And the parts of our ego, parts of our psyche, parts of our cells, even our blueprint, you know, they're here in the body. And I always say that the body is a truth barometer because whatever you feel, whatever is your truth, you're going to notice that inside. If you pay attention, if you listen, if you know those tools of like deep embodied listening,
Mm-hmm.
it will always tell you the truth, you know, in the moment of what's happening, how are you feeling on the inside, which is that connection to ourselves. It's not just with our thoughts, it's really to that inner landscape, which is inside the body. And that is also where that inner healing intelligence resides.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just in the organ brain, it is in every cell of the trillions of cells that you have in your body. They all hold this light, they all hold this intelligence, you know, which is in all of nature that knows exactly what to, you know, do in order to grow and to thrive and survive. And we're missing that if we are only going very quickly and we're only connecting to the intelligence, which is in the brain. We miss that. We miss that somatic, what I call the somatic intelligence. So the slowing down really is essential because in order to connect with that inner landscape, we need to kind of slow down to body time.
Mm-hmm.
We need to kind of slow down the mind so that it moves out of a place of like thinking incessantly to a different kind of mind. Like, for example, in the yogic philosophy, there are three different minds, you know, three different aspects of mind. And one of them is really around like awareness,
Mm-hmm.
to switch from that mode of thinking, words, thoughts, you know, to a place of being aware, you know, of what's happening. It is a different kind of consciousness, which the mind is really the instrument. And it's only when we slow down that we can also start to connect into a different kind of relationship with the different parts of ourselves that might be in the body, like our grief, like our anxiety,
Yeah.
like, you know, parts that feel abandoned, that feel insecure. Because what might be in the mind is this inner critic that's like, this doesn't feel good. Why are you feeling like this? You've done heaps of work on yourself. You're still feeling bad. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
That's predominantly in the mind. That's like the inner critic just like takes over and just gets so vicious.
Yeah.
But when we can just kind of go into the places in the body, let's say, you know, the place of insecurity in our belly and shine that sense of awareness. And when we slow down, we start to connect to other aspects of who we are that are not so like mind dominant,
Yeah.
you know, that are more kind of somatic dominant, that were maybe created when we in those pre-verbal years, you
Right.
know,
Mm-hmm.
of how of our growth and development. So this is just one of the reasons, a couple of reasons why it's so important to slow down, because healing really comes from the connection that you have with yourself, that
Yeah.
loving connection that you have with yourself, when you can really listen to these parts, not just listen to them, but really offer them, listen to the repair that they
Mhm.
need in order to kind of find freedom from that suffering, you know. And if we don't slow down and we don't connect, we don't listen in the right kind of way,
Yeah.
there's a way of listening to it, you know. If you listen to it, but then you say, oh, well, you're not good enough and I don't want to listen to you anymore. And like, why are you here? Then that's not healing for the part. And then that part is going to feel more sad.
Right.
But if you listen with curiosity, if you listen with compassion, if you slow down, um, and listen in that kind of mode of awareness, you know, it's just like, so that's really what these parts need. And that's really where they start to break free from the shackles of pain and suffering, which I really hope, you know, that humanity, um, yeah, breaks up from, and find that balm and, you know, that support.
Yeah. Beautifully said. Yeah, thank you for explaining it in that way. We talk a lot about slowing down here, and I thought that I lived more slowly until I began doing this work, and I was like, oh, I really do need to slow down. And it's something that I'm always meeting within myself because, as you've named here, it's not just in our bodies, but it's in the world around us, and everything around us is encouraging us to go go and produce and perform and get there faster and work harder. And it's the sea that we're all swimming in, at least in Western culture. I'm curious, is it like that in other parts of the world too that you travel to?
I think it's different for different parts.
Sure.
Yeah. But I also want to name that, you know, in certain kind of, I think with the global majority
Hmm.
and most, you know, there's like different kind of trauma imprints and different kind of resources. But when there is trauma, people will want to go into their heads, right?
Yeah.
Because it's uncomfortable to be in the body.
No.
And I think that I've seen that working with every culture, you know, everybody, because that's just part of our physiology.
Hmm.
I see different levels of resistance to slow down and being in the body for sure.
Yeah.
So I think in the Western world, there is more resistance, I would say, because it's uncomfortable. You know, you're really going against the grain of the conditioning,
Hmm.
that is in the culture. And with certain cultures that are more kind of connected to the body,
Hmm.
also is like, you know, there's so many things around like class and education
Right.
and the different, you know, conditionings in each community. But what I have noticed is just a less resistance. So
Mm.
when I'm talking about, you know, the connection to the body, in Asia they will be like, oh yeah, I get that, you know, and then there
Okay.
is more of a like a more of a like, oh yeah, I can do that, you
Yeah.
know, like I can, you know, because I work with a lot of like for example, these sex traffic survivors, like they've never had an education, you
Right.
know,
Hmm.
but they have a body and they feel, you know, they know their feelings, they can feel it in the body. So when we work on the level of like, what are you noticing right now? They can say that, you know,
Wow.
I'm feeling a lump in my throat, you know, I'm feeling this. Sometimes it's easier because there's not so much resistance with the intellectual mind, you know, that wants to kind of control everything, or it's just not normal in that culture.
Interesting to hear it in that way, that it's not necessarily that it's different, it's that there's just less resistance to slowing down and being more in the body. Yeah.
Yeah, so like, you know, when I'm working with white like folks that come from a Western culture,
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily have to do with like race, I think. I think that it has to do with culture
Yeah.
and conditioning. I have to like spend so much time working on like protectors,
Yeah.
that instead of, like we spend 5, 6, 7, 8 sessions just working with the protectors, the resistance of, you know, the fears and concerns. If we go into the body, if we connect to, what's really here, like what's going
Yeah.
to happen, and a lot of people, I think, in the Western world struggle with that. There's a lot of resistance to go into the body. Um, yeah. So I have a lot of empathy and I really understand that.
Yeah. Well, and it makes sense, depending on our history and what we've gone through, like you've already named, sometimes the body can feel really uncomfortable and sometimes painful. And these are the things that we do to really keep ourselves safe. And I've really come to
Absolutely.
understand that, yeah, and really appreciate that about my mind and about the different ways in which all of my protectors and parts try to just keep me safe. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, I know we're approaching the hour and we can start making our way towards the end of the episode. And this episode is actually airing during Virgo season. And for Virgo season, we're focusing on service, which is one of the reasons I was inspired to have you on today. And also this connection to the earth, which I know is something that's really important to you. And so I'm curious as we're kind of approaching the end of the episode, what might be some practices that people could maybe begin to explore if they wanted to begin to deepen their connection with their bodies and the earth? Because to me, I've noticed that as I've connected with my body, it's kind of inherently connected me more to the earth because earth is body. At least that's the way I see it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that the first thing that we could, I think, really do to connect with our body is to slow down.
Yeah. You're like what I just said.
It's like slowing
Slow down.
down, finding moments of slowing down, being curious. If there's resistance around the slowing down, like being curious about what that resistance might be. Um, and then when we do kind of slow down, saying hello, sometimes it's all we have to do is to
Mhm.
say hello,
Yeah.
to the body, to acknowledge that the body is here, to actually feel the body, the container of your body, whether it's with your hands, maybe it's in a hug, with a loved one. Um, and to prioritize, I think, time for that. For me, I think a lot of this work with plant medicine comes from the devotion of the plants. Well, just not just certain kind of plant medicines that bring you in different altered states of consciousness, but really with
All the plants.
all plants, right? Because
Yes.
if you go into the Amazon, it's like a pharmacy out there. But I think that deeper, when, what I understand from my journey with plants and plant medicine is that these plants are shaped really by the intelligence of the earth. It's shaped by the intelligence of life. It's like our somatic intelligence. I talk about that being the inner healing intelligence that heals everything, a cut, trauma, whatever wound, whether it's like mental or psychological. And I think just kind of spending, time in nature, prioritizing time in nature where we can start to open up to maybe the intelligence which is here on the earth and to bring it deeper into a place of service, like to really support the preservation of the earth, whether
Yes.
it's through donating to a charity, I mean, there's just so much out there that we can help,
Mhm.
with really taking care of the earth because, it really needs to be taken care of and
Yes.
it can't survive without our support because so we don't, our culture doesn't care about the earth very much. It's
Right.
just all about taking, taking, taking.
Hmm.
And I think part of this counter community and spiritual community is taking action to give back.
Mm.
to the earth. And it's all very individual for each person, but um, go out and plant a tree. And join, pick up litter from, I think the beach or something,
Yeah.
or organize something like that. Do something that will support and heal the earth because it's not going to heal unless we put action, and we need lots of people to put lots of action into it to
We
change
do.
it,
We do.
back into balance.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to that thread of karma yoga that you mentioned towards the beginning. Yeah,
Mm.
how it's without action that it's just empty words, and so we really have to do something.
We have to do something and change our perspective around reciprocity. Like, it's really around reciprocity.
Mm,
What are we consuming? How can we, small way, you know, um, give,
mm.
right?
Yeah,
Give to, and this earth is our home. So how can we, yeah, give back to our home as much as we're taking from it?
yeah, yeah. And she gives to us so generously and unconditionally, and how can we return that back to her? Beautiful.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly.
Well, I have maybe just one more question, and then I'd love to hear a little bit more about any upcoming trainings you might have and how people can connect with you. But I'm,
Sure.
yeah, curious for someone who is maybe curious about trauma-informed care, whether, let's say it's more on the receiving end. If someone has kind of been on their healing journey and maybe feeling that missing piece, or perhaps maybe someone is curious to explore plant medicine, what are some first steps that you would recommend or offer before someone dives in?
Are you talking about like finding for folks to
Yeah,
find
yeah, if they wanted to
trauma-informed
find, yeah, like a
space?
trauma-informed support or like or plant medicine or even like a trauma-informed plant medicine support.
Yeah, right.
Hmm.
I think screening is very important,
Yeah,
and watching out for red flags. There are quite a lot of, I would say there are a lot of red flags out there, especially in the plant medicine space. So I think that is important to to notice if you're deciding to sit with a person, how much care do they show towards you?
mm.
How much interest do they show towards you? I've been to so many plant medicine ceremonies where I don't even know the facilitator.
Wow.
I don't even know the person, like I just get an invitation, an email, and then, you just kind of go into go to this experience. And I would kind of be really wary about that,
Yeah.
if you're not having like to really know who the organizers are, at least. So, because sometimes, you also get visiting facilitators coming from overseas.
Right.
Sometimes they're indigenous, sometimes they don't really speak the language. There are many different contexts where, these circles happen. Um, I would be wary if a person like reaches out and say, "Can I have a conversation? Can I schedule a call?" And if the facilitator or the organizer says no,
Mm.
I think that would be like the first kind of warning sign. Um, I would say to someone that it might be important to reflect on what you need in order to feel safe in an experience, and to know that your needs are never too much.
Mm.
Yeah. And that you really matter, your sense of safety really matters. And it is absolutely okay and highly advisable to have a conversation with, the person that's leading, or the retreat center, or, your therapist, your psychedelic assisted therapist, around your history, and also, your sensitivities and what helps to create safety for you, and, what you can, what kind of layers of support that you might need. on the different levels, like physical, emotional, spiritual, mental.
Mhm.
And to watch, like, if a facilitator gets defensive, if
Mhm.
they are not understanding of what you're kind of sharing with them, I would say that that's a huge red flag.
Yeah.
Another thing as well that I think is important for newcomers, um, it was just at the tip of my tongue and then I forgot. So just bear with me.
Yeah, of course. Take your time. It happens. The things
Uh,
float away.
yeah, and this was like a very important one. Oh yeah, I got it. So it's really to listen to your body as a truth barometer because I think that for like folks like myself who, come from a background of adversity like CPTSD, or if you've experienced any kind of abuse or even like neglect, um, the norm is not trusting your body. The norm is not trusting your wisdom. The norm is not trusting yourself. There might be a lot of parts that says, oh, well, that's not true. I don't feel safe. But, sometimes our tendency might be to dismiss the parts that don't feel safe,
Right.
right? When you kind of get something's just not feeling right. And it doesn't mean that the facilitator is a bad person. It just means that their style of facilitation might not be the right style for you,
Right.
or the way that they're saying something, or they might like their tone, the way that they're saying it just doesn't feel quite right. It doesn't feel quite safe.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I think that more often than not, in these cases of abuse with clients that I see, it's like they knew that, but it's like the tendency and also the history is for them is that has been dismissed by other people in the past.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been internalized where they don't kind of heed those kind of warning signs at first,
Hmm.
where it's like this person isn't safe or the space that they create is not the right space for me, like doesn't feel just right. And for those people out there that are listening, really my suggestion is to really pay attention. If it doesn't feel right, if your body, if there's parts of you that don't feel safe, I would say I would lean on saying no to that.
Yeah.
Or having a conversation with the facilitator because it might be a blind spot for facilitator and that's absolutely okay.
Yeah.
And just noticing how they respond to that. If they're like, thank you so much for letting me know, like, yeah, how can I adapt, how I work in a way that feels just right for you. If that's not that open kind of like, if the facilitator takes it personally, then they're not really professional, it's not
Yeah.
it's they're not really in that position to, I think, lead the session in a way that feels safe.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are really wonderful things for people to look out for. And as you said, there are so many more. And yeah, I guess
Oh,
maybe I'd be
oh,
curious.
so just one thing
Yes,
to
please.
add to that, like I actually have a resource,
That's what I was just wondering.
yeah, I have a resource of like yellow flags,
Yes.
green flags, and red flags that is going to be part of that you can download for free.
Cool.
Actually, I'm actually starting a new campaign at the moment that's going to launch soon, and it would be helpful for me to share it in this podcast. But
Yes, I'd love that.
I'm starting a campaign with some other organizations such as ICEERS that are based in Europe, around prevention of sexual abuse in psychedelic spaces.
Hmm.
And the name of the campaign is called Sacred Not Silent. And part of this campaign that we're doing together is to offer these resources around these green flags, yellow flags, orange flags, and red flags for facilitators. So when that's launched, maybe River, I can share that with you, and you can share it with this audience too. Maybe they'll find
Yeah.
it helpful.
Yeah, I would love that. I think that would be great. I think it's really important to get that sort of information out there, and it kind of ties into an idea that I had. I know I had mentioned I'd share it with you today, but maybe we could talk about it another time. But just a way to just make people more aware of situations. I think education can be really empowering. Once we have the understanding, we can choose differently. And
Mm.
I'd be really curious to see the ripple effect. And what really keeps me going sometimes is that I trust that the work will, that I may not live to see the full impact of the work that I do. And you may not live to see the full impact of the work you do. After you are gone, these ripple effects will still be going, and who knows what will come out of it. So that's what really keeps me going. Yeah. If people wanted to connect with you, Atira, what would be the best way? And do you have any upcoming trainings or anything you'd like to offer to the audience?
Yes, absolutely. So folks can jump on my website, which is atiratan.com. They can connect to me on Instagram, which is at Atira Tan. But I think that I would love for some of the folks in the audience, if this has resonated for you, to join one of to explore some of my trainings, my offerings, some of my programs. So I am very passionate about two things: to educate like plant medicine facilitators in, that approach of creating that safety, but not just that, but really kind of giving tools around facilitators to understand what to do around trauma. So when trauma imprints arise, in psychedelic experiences, how can we hold that space? Like what kind of to identify repair, to understand our role and responsibility in that space. So I have a trauma-informed plant medicine facilitator program,
Mhm.
which I think that you've done
I
and
have,
been part
yes.
of.
Yes.
And then another part is also around integration. So
Mhm.
I think that integration for me, it's like super important. And I feel like it's a part of the psychedelic journey that is often overlooked. But I would say that I've experienced I have experienced more trauma resolution in the face of integration than I have actually in these altered states.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's really when the embodiment, like the altered state, is an experience and it can open certain doors. But sometimes in psychedelic experiences, it's not complete.
Right.
It opens a door, but there's no resolution that happens, there are insights and so on and so forth. So I have a somatic plant medicine integration program, which is a foundation program, which is 50 hours. And then at the moment, I'm also running a 9-month mentorship program, which is an advanced training. So more kind of in-depth,
Mm.
um, month by month journey for practitioners, which will really create, help to create like confidence,
Mhm.
really give you those layers of support that you need as a psychedelic professional, so that you're not kind of stumbling in the dark, going like, oh, what am I going to do when this arises, that
Right.
arises? Really giving you very solid, tips and tools, but also for you to go on your own healing journey, because we're always doing that in tandem, aren't
We
we,
are,
as
yes.
practitioners? So really to support that part of your journey as well,
Yeah.
so that you can be more resourced when you work with others.
Yeah. The support, like you said, it's everything. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, oh, thank you so much, Atira, for your wisdom and for your lived experience and for your generosity and for your service to not just to your clients and, of course, to me, but to the world, and just the light and the love and the compassion and the softness that you bring. I truly believe it's the medicine that we all really need, and you really are one of my greatest teachers. So thank you so much for being here today. It's been an honor.
Thank you so much, River. Yeah, your words mean so much to me. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course. Thanks so much for making it till the end of today's episode. Before you go, if this episode spoke to your heart, moved something in you, or offered a moment of clarity or perhaps helped you to feel even just a little bit more seen or heard or understood, I invite you to please share this episode with a friend. Together, we create space for the feminine frequency to rise, not just in us as individuals, but in our families, in our communities, and ultimately in our collective. And this is how we do it, by sharing one story at a time, by having one conversation at a time, by taking one small step at a time. And if you're wanting to support the podcast even more, it truly helps to leave a 5-star rating and review. Your words help other women find this space, feel seen, and know that they're not alone on their healing journeys. As a thank you, when you leave a review, take a screenshot and email it to me at riva@windsofchangesac.com. I'll give you a free registration to our online trauma-informed breathwork circle for women held on Zoom every third Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's a powerful space for release, restoration, and real connection. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for helping this work ripple outward. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of each other. Fighting for the voice of the womb, clearing the pain from your womb, creating new life from your womb, rebuilding with the phases of the moon.